Jeff. Welcome to the Kind Faith message for the week. Excited to be here. The question, actually there's a bunch of questions, but the question I want to ask as we start is, do you know the process of forgiveness? How familiar are you with the process of forgiveness? That's what we want to talk about in the next couple weeks, and we're going to dive in this week. Before we get going, I want to invite you to subscribe or hit the like button. Either one is incredibly helpful for us. Last week we talked about Jesus' conversation with Peter. Actually, I see it as Peter leading, and he asks Jesus, Lord, how many times do I have to forgive? 7 times? And the key to the number is that that's a theological number that means to completion. And Jesus says, no, not just 7 times, but 77 times. Continually, consistently. And it made me realize when I first encountered that forgiveness is a practice. It doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come naturally at all. It's something we have to engage and practice. And so we're in the process these weeks of talking about and then practicing forgiveness. So let's talk about the first big question. And the first big question is connected to the first big point or part of the process of forgiveness, which is humanizing. We talked last week about forgiveness is a 3-part process: humanizing, releasing the right for vengeance, and allowing your feelings to change. We're going to walk through each of those, but today we're talking about humanizing. And here's the big question. Why did God have to become man and die on a cross in order to forgive? I remember when I was a freshman in high school and we were having a Bible study and we were talking about the all-powerful God. God is omnipotent. That was the theological word. And as I thought about that as a freshman in high school, the thought occurred to me, well, couldn't God just in heaven from his throne say, I forgive you? He's totally powerful. Why this whole drama of becoming a baby and being born in a manger and then living among us and then dying on a cross? What was that about? And it's about this key reality of the world. It is a world reality. This isn't just good advice. This isn't just a theological principle. This is a law of reality, kind of like gravity is a law of reality. And it is this: to actually practice forgiveness, the process has to be followed. And this first part of the process, humanizing, has to happen. God set up the world in such a way that forgiveness doesn't happen without humanizing. And so God had to, in order to forgive, out of his abundance of love for us, become human. It was the way he established it. It's the way the world works. And so God became human in order to bring forgiveness. When I first encountered this point, I wish I could say that this is original to me. Actually, I don't, because honestly, so much of everything we know is due to someone else who gave it to us. And this whole concept was given to me by my professor at seminary. His name was Lou Smedes. He's written several books on forgiveness. His most popular is The Art of Forgiving. We'll have the link down below so you can order it. Anyway, he was lecturing and he talked about the need to humanize as the first step of forgiveness. And I was like, I got that. I'm good. That's no problem. I'm great at humanizing. I mean, when he described it, I thought, yeah, I'm in seminary. So I do great at humanizing people. I mean, when somebody does something against me, I easily see their sin. I can categorize it as sin, and it's a part of the sinful state of humanity, the original sin that all people are born with. I'm good at humanizing. I even took it a step further. I said, I'm great at humanizing because I can look at them and see their psychological flaws. I was a psychology major in college, so I understood that our psychological flaws cause us to hurt other people. So I could see their psychological flaws. In fact, in some cases, I could categorize the psychological flaws. I'm great at forgiveness. I remember feeling so mature in seminary, and I took it a step further and said, not only could I theologically understand their sin and psychologically understand their flaws, but I also get their immaturity. They hurt me because they lacked the maturity to get the full picture. Here's the problem. Do you see the problem? I hope you see the problem. I wasn't humanizing. All of that sounds like humanizing. It's not humanizing. It's dismissing. Dismissiveness means I get to hold my position above, right? I'm the theologically enlightened. I'm the psychologically aware. I'm the mature one, and I'm holding my position above. In fact, most of what we call forgiveness is actually dismissiveness. We practice dismissiveness and minimize our personal pain by dismissing the behavior, and it just is not what God called us to. But think again about Jesus coming off his throne. So, did you get the key point? I'm going to read it so that you've got it. Most of what we think is forgiveness is actually minimizing our hurt through dismissiveness. So how do we practice real forgiveness? Jesus gives us some insight into stepping out, down, and away from, and toward. Remember the woman who was caught in adultery. I actually have it here for you. The woman who was caught in adultery in John chapter 8, the Pharisees and scribes are trying to catch Jesus. And in verse 2, it says, early on in the morning, he came to the temple. Jesus came to the temple. And all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who'd been caught in adultery and placed her in the midst. And they said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Paint the picture, right? They're in the temple. Everyone has gathered. In my imagination, I lose sight of this. Jesus is teaching a great crowd, and all of a sudden the authority, the father figures of the culture bring in this woman who's in trouble. Remember when you were a kid and you were over at your best friend's house and they got in trouble and the parents started to raise their voice? What'd you do? I kind of ran and hid. You just kind of, I don't want to be here. I'm getting away from this. That's the feeling that was going on. And then when you got enough distance, it became a spectacle, right? And that's where this woman found herself, in the middle of a spectacle with everybody standing above, either morally or socially or psychologically or theologically. They'd taken their sides and they're standing in judgment. And they ask Jesus this question. So what do you say? Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. But Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older, the wiser. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. That's the key. Do you see the key? The woman is right there with Jesus. You probably know how the rest of this story goes. Jesus says, Is there anyone to accuse you? Neither do I. Go and sin no more. And brings to her empathy and mercy. But the powerful reality of this is that Jesus was with. He didn't join the crowds and form the circle. He actually engaged with her. He didn't stand in righteous judgment or theological condemnation or psychological dismissiveness or judge her by her immaturity. He actually went to be with her. It's empathy. He could feel what she felt. In fact, in your imagination, continue with the picture. The crowd has formed this big circle. They're watching Jesus. Jesus is with her. The scribes and Pharisees have kind of left, but before they left, think about what it was like for Jesus to come with her. He actually took her perspective. As he looked around and looked down at the ground, he could feel all of the eyes on him. He could understand what she was feeling in the moment at this time of condemnation. So he left the crowd where he could have stood and joined her to feel what she felt. That part of forgiveness is so hard. I have an amazing wife, as many of you know, and she has an incredible ability to do this. I've watched her over and over again get hurt by people, and she moves in and says this kind of thing. If I were them, I would have. She has the ability to put herself in their place, to walk in their shoes, to engage with them and go an extra mile in order to understand their heart in the situation. And that's the first step of humanizing, to actually empathize. I'm going to talk about a story personally in a few moments, but I want to talk about the second piece. Because the second piece is not just joining with and taking perspective and empathizing, but in Mark chapter 1, the very end of Mark chapter 1, right before we jump into chapter 2, Jesus heals a man with leprosy. Same kind of story. This man is there, everybody's watching, and what was powerful about the story is that in that culture, a leper was not to be touched. They were unclean, and it was believed that if you touched the leper, you would get the disease as well. But not only that, you'd become ceremonially unclean and couldn't worship. And this leper comes before Jesus, and he doesn't just say, from on high, be clean. He reaches out and touches. So, humanizing is stepping off our throne, out of our judgments, gaining the perspective of the person that we're wanting to forgive, and it is touching. It is engaging in the emotions and the feelings. Brene Brown calls this empathy. It is empathy, and it's an incredible thing. In fact, I've got a video about empathy that'll be in the description of the video below that will really help expand your understanding of that word. But it's empathy. Humanizing is empathy. And that's the first step of forgiveness. And it requires a lot of practice. When I was first in ministry, my first ordained position, there was a situation that came about with my boss, and in so many ways I felt thrown under the bus. I felt discounted. I felt ignored. I felt disrespected. It was probably one of the deepest hurts I'd ever experienced. And I dismissed it. I theologically stood above, I psychologically analyzed, and I maturely marginalized. I did all of that. I didn't forgive. And it wasn't till decades later that I experienced exactly what he experienced from his perspective. All of a sudden. And I wish I could say I did it myself. I had the courage to humanize him. I didn't. I just found myself as a human in the same circumstance. And so many lights went on. And I called him. And I said, I need to ask your forgiveness for not forgiving you all these years. And he said something to me that was so profound. He said, Jeff, I'm sorry for whatever you've gone through. I don't know what you've gone through, but something has caused you to hurt in a way where you understood my hurt. And it was one of the most healing moments of my life up to that point. He came down, could have stood in judgment, and met me where I was. And I, by force of circumstance, came to where he was and humanized him. Here's the great hope of this message, that your circumstances don't have to force you into that position. You can actually become good at forgiveness. You can actually practice forgiveness in a way that is not dismissiveness, but allows you to step in and alongside people. I want to read to you something I wrote in my devotional time this morning. I wrote this: I'm realizing that there is a field of debris in my past, scars that have left a mark on my life. They've spoiled what could have been a beautiful landscape with anger and bitterness. I can go back. I can go back and pick up each of those scars, each of those mars, and I can forgive and change the landscape as I look back. That's my invitation for all of us. You've got somebody to forgive. Maybe right now, but maybe in your past. We all have forgiveness to practice. Jesus' command, love one another, and then he follows it right up with forgive. And so if we want to be lovers of people, and if we want to love well like Jesus loved, then we have to go back and pick up the scars, the marks, the mars, and we have to practice forgiveness. And the first thing we do is humanize, to begin to humanize people. So as you live out the rest of this week, one person, pick one, start practicing forgiveness. Let me pray for you. Jesus, help us to forgive the way you forgave. You commanded us in your prayer, Lord, to forgive. May we forgive the way you forgive us, Lord. May we be people who humanize, who step off the throne, who step out of judgment and refuse to practice dismissiveness, but who practice forgiveness. And may we take this first step and humanize people. Lord, we pray this in your name. Amen. Well, thanks for being here. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. You can head over to the website, thekindfaith.org, and we've got the notes from the sermon as well as links to the video. They're also in the video description below. So we want to engage with you. We want to help. We want to help everyone become a disciple and actually do what Jesus called us to do. So let's be kind. Let's forgive. Let's humanize. God bless you.